Okay, we are back. Marty is amazing, is it?
Yes.
Have you ever seen a four-step presentation like that?
No.
Oh my God. I should have been caught on video. So the thing that's amazing about it is I believe that the spiritual exercises that are in our book, there's an economy to them. And as complicated alcoholics, will find every way possible to make it deeper or change it or rewrite it or something. And I think there's spiritual virtue in just doing what it says. Just doing what it says. And that's what Marty gave us. So I'm just going to read a couple of things here because I like the way I read them. On page 71 it says, we hope you are convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. So much of that inventory, it was emphasizing this selfishness, the self-centeredness, the self-seeking that really is what's causing our self-sabotaging of the quality of our life. It's causing us spiritual and emotional damage. We're doing it ourselves. Our problems aren't coming at us, they're coming from us. And when you start to really look deeply into this inventory process, you start to see that. If you've already made a decision, third step in an inventory, what Marty went through, of your grosser handicaps, you've made a good beginning, it says. That being so, you've swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. And that's the point of this. We don't need to know what we already know. We need to uncover and discover and then get about the business of discarding these things that have really been blocking us. They're blocking us off from a quality of life. They're blocking us off from recovery, which is going to include release from alcohol. It's blocking us off from all that stuff. So was I skeptical of this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, the recovery program, when I first looked at it? Yeah. I don't know one person that walked into AA and saw those and said, oh my God, finally there's an answer. None of us did that. So we have to we have to surrender. We've got to come to believe. We've got to make a decision to believe. We've got to take some action. We've got to start. The first thing you do, I'm from the business world, right? And if something's really screwed up, let's say staffing turnover is outrageous. It's like 60% a year in your business. First thing you gotta do is you gotta do an assessment. You gotta do an analysis and look at everything that has to do with personnel to really be able to see what is the problem. It's usually the goddamn manager. And the manager's got to go. That's usually what it is. But businesses don't like to hear that. So there's dancing all around, and there's more turnover, and everything's a nightmare for another 2 years. But if you really want to see what the hell's going wrong with an organization, you do a root cause analysis, right? And I'm telling you, that's what the fourth step is. What is wrong with you? Well, let's do a root cause analysis. Let's look at step 4. Now I'm gonna do something very heretical here. I am gonna read out of the 12 steps and 12 traditions a couple of paragraphs. Can you imagine? These are sections that I read a lot because they encapsulate what we're trying to talk about here today. What is our problem? Why are we completely failing at life? Why can't we stop drinking? Is there anybody that just can't stop drinking? You're trying. It says here on page 174, unless each AA member follows to the best of their ability our suggested 12 steps to recovery, they almost certainly signed their own death warrant. So this is Bill Wilson's writing. He's basically saying, if you haven't done the steps, you're supposed to drink. Has anybody ever told you that? I'll tell you that. If you haven't done the steps and you're an alcoholic, you're supposed to drink. Your drunkenness and disillusion are not going to be penalties inflicted by people in authority. They result from your own personal disobedience to spiritual principles. So what is disobedience to spiritual principles? What does that look like? It looks like, well, I'm going to do that 4-step someday. They've been talking about it. I think I need to go to more step meetings and hear more about it before I get started. It's like, well, I'm not going to make that amends. I don't care. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not making that amends. There's a lot of different ways that you can have personal disobedience to these recovery principles. And that is what the fault's going to be. I go to a beginner's meeting. I love this beginner's meeting, and I never name the beginner's meeting because they really kind of deserve some anonymity. All right, it's a Basking Ridge beginner's meeting on Monday night, and what the format of this meeting is there's usually 80 to 100 people there every Monday night, and a lot of them are early on in their journey in recovery. And the format of the meeting is people with less than 90 days are encouraged to share first, okay? And then after they're all done, people with 6 months to a year, and then when they're all done, the meeting gets opened up to anybody that wants to share experience, strength, and hope. Now, when you're listening to the people with less than 90 days, the self-centeredness blows your hair back. like you ever see that RCA commercial, where the guy's getting his hair blown back? It's like, oh, my parents, my job, and cops are on me, I'm just got my DUI, nobody understands. Oh, thank you. and if you're anything like me, you're like, wow. And then from 6 months to a year, it's like, well, life kind of really still sucks. But, my sponsor's got me looking at some stuff, and I'm looking at some stuff, and, I'm starting to see, some things in my life, And then when you get to people with like a year, it's like, well, I did my 5th step the other day, and, my girlfriend's back talking to me, and, my parents are inviting me over to Sunday. You start to see the progression of healing. You start to see the actual power manifesting in the people in the fellowship, and it's amazing. And in some of my old areas, it really has become it's become orthodox to work through the steps with someone that you're sponsoring. That's not the way it was when I first came in. And I think that really does increase your odds of surviving this progressively fatal illness called alcoholism. Folks, in the American Medical Association, the DSM, it talks about alcoholism as being a chronically relapsing condition. So everybody goes, tell your doctor you're an alcoholic. Well, if you do that, he's going to want payment up front. Because he understands that alcoholism is a chronically relapsing condition. But we know that that doesn't have to be true. That doesn't have to be true. Many of us recover. Marty and I together have about 70 years of sobriety. Just Marty and I, for God's sake. So this thing does work. So if you fail to do the best you can with the suggested 12 steps to recovery, you're expected to relapse, and it's going to be your fault. It's going to be your fault because we've shown you what the recovery process is. And for one reason or another, you are stubbornly disobeying those spiritual suggestions. Now, That's the bad news. The good news, I'm going to jump to the forward of the 12 steps and 12 traditions and read this. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. That's a beautiful paragraph, and I'm gonna unpack it a little bit, at least how I see it today. So the 12 steps are principles, and they're spiritual in nature. What does spiritual in nature mean? Well, one day I was asked to give a talk on spirituality, and I did what you would do. I went to the Google to find some definitions, and I found a Google definition that I liked, and they define spirituality like this. Spirituality is an inner personal pathway to connection with the divine. That's how they define spirituality. So these 12 steps, what are these 12 steps? They're a personal inner pathway to connection with the power, with, you can use whatever terminology you want for God. I don't care, and I know God doesn't either. But we've admitted that we're powerless, and that's going to lead us into seeking power. It just does. It has to. Where are you going to go if you don't have any power and you need power to survive? You're going to look for power. And these 12 steps, what they do is they connect us. They put us in unity with this power. And this power solves the problems that we can't solve. I don't quit drinking. I haven't escaped drinking. I've been released from alcohol. And that happens as a result of these steps. It's a release. It's not even alcohol's not even an issue in my life today, if I keep in fit spiritual condition. But it says, so they're spiritual in nature, and if which practiced as a way of life. Now, here's the way I see everything today. Tomorrow I'll see it different. This is the way I see it today. I know there's some veterans in here, right? And to be able to get into a branch of service, you have to go to boot camp. And what boot camp is, it's an extreme experience of discipline. What happens is they push you as far as they can push you. They march you as far as you can march. They keep you awake as long as they can keep you awake. They make you crawl through mud. You do all kinds of stuff. And what it does is it sets the stage for a disciplined way of action. So now you're prepared. You're prepared for adversity and danger and all this other kind of stuff. And I believe today that's what the first 9 steps do. It's like an extreme series of exercises that are gonna discipline you to spirituality, understanding how to live and how to react. And then we're offered steps 10, 11, and 12, where we turn this thing into a way of life. So when it says that Alcoholics Anonymous needs to be practiced as a way of life, it has to become our operational methodology, the spirituality that's explained to us in the steps, and the exercises that we take. And we go through the steps with our sponsor, and it's like a spiritual boot camp. And none of us do any of this stuff perfectly. No one among us can maintain anything like perfect adherence to these spiritual principles. But you know what we claim? We claim progress. If we continue to be consistent with this stuff, we can claim progress. I can claim progress. I can't claim perfection, but I'll tell you what, God damn it, I can claim progress over the years. You see the changes in me year over year. So all of that will expel the obsession to drink. Expel the obsession. That's why I call it a release. That whatever goes on in your head that allows you to put alcohol back in your body, or I'll say drugs, that allows you to put that stuff back in your body. Something goes on, right? Because you've made a decision. I'm done. I'm not drinking anymore. I don't want to ever smoke crack again, or any of that stuff, right? You've made that decision and you were serious about it, and it goes back in your body. These 12 steps are going to expel that state called obsession that moves us into drinking or using. That's what these 12 steps do. And they do a whole lot more, but that's an important thing. If you're dying from alcoholism or you're dying from drug addiction, it's important information. How not to. And so all you have to do is turn the 12 steps into a way of life. And this is a promise. And it will allow you to become happily and usefully whole. So whole with a W. There was something missing in me. And I knew it from when I was 5 years old. You'll hear this so often from people sharing or from the podium, that I felt different, or I felt like I was on the wrong planet, or the best way I can describe what was missing in me is I had what I see today as a spiritual vacancy. There was something missing in me. I knew it was missing. I just didn't feel right. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel comfortable. And when I discovered alcohol, I started using alcohol as a means of filling this spiritual vacancy. And it worked sometimes until I became a vomiting pig, after like the 30th drink. But there would be that, there would be that ease and that comfort. And I'd be worrying all day long about, work tomorrow or having to go to court, motor vehicle or whatever. I'd be like 4 drinks in, and be like, hell with all that, all that stuff dropped off. And I saw that, I saw alcohol as being the solution for this internal condition which is in me. And I see it today as a spiritual vacancy. If I'm not living a spiritual life, I am going to have a spiritual vacancy. And all manner of sprees are what is going to come next. I may not drink. I may act out by spending money I shouldn't. I may do it with food. I may do it with gambling. I may do it with sex. I might need the new Corvette Stingray with the special chip, Marty. Because I think that there's this friend that we lost just recently in Texas. He would call me up every morning, and we had this running joke. He'd call me up and he'd go, Chris, man, I just got the brand new Humvee. Oh my God, you gotta see this thing. It's got every bell and whistle. It does this, it does this, it does this. It's an amazing vehicle. And I go, yeah, it sounds really good. He goes, then he'd go, that wasn't it either. You know what I mean? Like we're forever trying to fill a spiritual vacancy with externals, with toys and behavior and stuff, where to feel whole, this whole with a W, it's only going to be filled spiritually. It's only going to be filled spiritually. And I'm doing all this stuff so I don't die of alcoholism. And I find out as I'm moving through that this is the secret to my quality of life. This is the secret to being happy, joyous, and free, and knowing a new freedom and a new happiness, and being rocketed into the 4th dimension of reality, and all the promises that they talk about in this book. That's what I find as a byproduct. I would have to do this just not to drink myself to death. And in this is an answer I was looking for since I was 5. To feel whole. So, am I grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous? You're damn right I am. So Marty did a great job with step 4. We've got our inventory, and somebody showed up at my house with like a 600-page inventory one day.
Wow.
It was 2.5 days. I had to hear him. And he was not. So Marty showed us the true economy to the 4-step, right? It doesn't have to be long and drawn out, and now it's time. Now it's time. I have this. Now it's time to sit with someone and share it with them. Now I knew somebody who was so specific about the instructions in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, because it says we share this with God, ourselves, and another person. He would go to a church and share the inventory. He would sit in front of a mirror and share the inventory. And then he would share it with another person because he wanted to follow exactly the instructions. I'm not that militant. I think there's a little bit of latitude in this. Anyway, I'm also lazy. So anyway, it's time to really be honest. I have identified the causes and conditions of my failure at life, my failure in relationships, my failure in family, my failure in business. I've identified all these things. And there is a spiritual virtue to being honest with someone else about what I have discovered. Now, personally, I can tell you what the benefit was for me. I was always convinced I was a scumbag. I just, listen, I could show up like a nice guy. I could pretend to be a nice guy. I'd be your friend. But I knew deep inside, if you really knew who I was, you'd stay the hell away from me. And I felt that way about myself. If I could have stayed away from myself, I would have. So I came to you with that, with that crushed spirit, with that crippled spirit. Really having low self-esteem and everything they talk about, right? Just knowing I ain't right. And I remember the first time I shared inventory with Fish Food Phil. I remember walking out of, he took me to a park where he could walk his dogs too, because he believed in multitasking. And so he's listening to my fifth step while he's walking the dog. And I got to tell you, I went into the park, I'm resentful at my brother and sister, my head down. And after I got done, he goes, you done, I go, yeah, Phil, I'm done. He goes, that's not so bad. We can work with that. And I was dumbfounded by that response. I was dumbfounded. But when I look at the inventory I wrote, it wasn't that bad. I had created something that I was in the middle of existence about that wasn't true. There's so much delusion that comes with alcoholism. We believe so many things that are wrong. We have the wrong perspective on so many things. And I came out of that, and he convinced me at the end of that inventory that I'm not a bad person. I got caught up in some stuff. And he explained it to me like this. He goes, Chris, I believe you were an alcoholic before you started drinking. And what happened when you started drinking, you were like a campfire. The coals were smoldering, right? They were red and smoldering. And that was you before you took your first drink. And you take your first drink and it's like throwing gasoline on that campfire. Flames, burst into the air and they burn you and everybody near you. And he goes, you're trying to put that out now. You know what I mean? First of all, it's an illness. And second of all, you're taking action to put that fire out so it doesn't burn anybody, including you anymore. There's not a lot of people in this world that are making that kind of effort to be better people and more helpful. And I remember walking out of there and I didn't feel like a scumbag anymore. I had a way to go. Before I really felt good about myself, but there was a shift, there was a turn. And I believe when I walked out of that park, I was an Alcoholics Anonymous member. Mm-hmm. All right. Up until that point in time, I was auditing AA. And when I got done with that fifth step, you could not have told me I'm not a good AA member. And this was a long time ago. I've done many fifth steps. I've heard even many more. And I'll tell you what the hardest thing I have listening to fifth steps today is staying awake while they're being read to me. I'm being honest with you. Listen, you know, we're all the same. I've heard it all a million times. You know, and you're going to come to me with a fifth step, and you're going to lay it all out, and I'm going to pretend like it's an extraordinary thing. We're way more alike than we would want. We don't want to be alike. We don't want to be scumbags, but we don't want to be run of the mill, Alcoholics Anonymous members. We need to be special in some way. And what I've learned in these fifth steps is, we're just, we did the best we could under the circumstances. You got to understand, we were suffering from alcoholism. We're suffering from alcoholism. Now, I'm going to say something now that I don't expect you to believe, but I've come to the point where I absolutely believe this stuff now. I've gone through all my inventory. I've done my fifth step, and all the wrongs, all the harm that I caused, all that, I am not responsible for. And do you want to know why? Because alcoholism is an illness. I'm powerless over alcohol. It would be my fault if I had some power. I'm powerless over alcohol. And I'm being driven by 100 forms of fear, self-centeredness, self-consciousness, all these character defects. I'm unrecovered, and I'm out there trying to do the best I can, and I'm causing a lot of trouble. And I'm not responsible for any of it. It's a goddamn disease. But here's the thing. Here's the magic in Alcoholics Anonymous. I must be accountable for it. Alcoholics Anonymous tells me I must be accountable. I must make amends where I've caused harm. I must be accountable for all this stuff. And therein lies the spiritual virtue of Alcoholics Anonymous. We need to act like we were responsible for this stuff. You know what I mean? But come on. So I'm going to move a little bit into step 6 and 7 for a few minutes, and then I'm going to hand it over to Marty to fix everything. All right, so I've done my inventory. I've shared my inventory with everybody. Okay, I did this and I did that. Okay. Bless you, my son. I actually tried to listen to that this time, and I've shared it all. And so now I'm confronted with step 6 and step 7. There's no better place in the world to be for step 6 and step 7 than to have just done inventory and just done a fifth step. No better place in the world, because you have identified the things that you find objectionable, especially. You've just identified them all. And step 6 asks, are you willing to have God remove these defects of character? Are you willing to move away from this type of life? And almost always we are. Almost always we are. We've just identified why we've screwed things up, why we've been in 700 relationships, why we've had 3,500 jobs, why we had to move every 6 months. We've identified all that stuff. So am I willing to have God remove it? Yes. And in step 7, in an act of humility, I ask God to relieve me of these shortcomings. Now, if my first experience with step 6 and step 7 was, that's pretty irresponsible. Where's all the things I need to do? I might need to get removing character defects for dummies. I mean, don't I have to go to some seminars like on character defects, Tony Robbins, stuff? Don't I have to get dunked or something? It can't be that easy. And today, today, I want to just read something. When ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I'm now willing you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Then it says, we have then completed step 7, period. That's what the book says. All right? Now, that just seemed irresponsible to me. There's got to be all kinds of stuff I've got to do. I got to do this. You know what I got to do? I got to move right into step 8. And I got to put a list together of people and institutions that these defects of character have harmed. Why do I go to God with this stuff? Why is it God's job to remove these defects of character? Because there's nothing else. Haven't you tried? Oh, I can't believe I've done that one more time. I know I promised you like 6 times that I would not do that anymore. I know. Haven't you tried? Maybe, just maybe, these character defects are bigger than we are. And we need to, just like our alcoholism, we need to go to the power. So that's what I believe today, and Marty will come in and repair all this.
We sure enjoy talking about this stuff, right? The thing about I'm not going to repair anything, but I love the idea of the 5th step being confessional has been a part of theology from the beginning of time. It's a part of every sort of major theology that there is. Sitting down and sharing with somebody your foibles and your defects of character and your wrongdoings, that's been a part of this. Well, that's a big piece to this thing, and we admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being in that order. The order is very important because it's almost like the order of difficulty as well. It's easiest to admit it to God, harder to admit it to ourselves, and it's the most difficult to admit it to another human being. You would think somehow it was another way around, but this other human being piece is about the double standard of life. It's about the outside character that we want to present to the world. That's why we tell other people. That's why we look at other human beings and do this stuff, is so we can get rid of that character, that stage character. And God and ourselves can't do that. We can't hold ourselves to that level of accountability, and that's why the 5th step is so important. I just talked really quickly about setting up these 5 steps. When you start writing your inventory, you make your appointment for your 5th step. That's an important piece to remember. The minute you start writing your inventory, make an appointment for your 5th step. Do you know why? So you'll actually do it. The funny thing is you can sit there and you got a sponsor and he says, yeah, I get working on that 4th step. Okay, I'll see you next week. You see him next week. You say, hey, how's that 4th step coming? And he says, well, I got to the dollar store and I got a cahier and a couple pencils and I'm getting ready to do it. And you see him a week later and he says, how's that 4th step coming? Well, I've been trying to free up some time, and that cahier I got last week got lost and the dog ate it and all that. That's what happens. But if you set a date, the person most likely will have it done. And this is how it works. If you give a person, which I do, 10 days to 2 weeks to do a 4-step inventory, when does the alcoholic start writing their inventory?
Last day.
Yep, day 9. Day 9. Inevitable. Unless you're perfect, like Nicoletta. And you probably have one prepared long before you're asked. You know what I mean? But you start working on it on day 9. And then you come in with this tripe, this absolute crap. This is my experience. You got this little matchbook of inventory, and you say, okay, let's try this again. Now I give you a few days. That's it. And you're going to do it, like I said. The economy, I think, is important. The economy of a 5th step is important too. That 600-pager, this is what happened to me. Is our book says things that are very interesting and can sometimes be twisted. It's we have to be prepared for a long talk. Well, long is a subjective word. Would you agree?
Yeah.
I'm an alcoholic with 4 kids, grandkids, and fishing, and I do shit. I got a full life. So long is subjective. So I had a guy, one of the guys early on. His name's Jeff. He's our delegate. He's a great guy. A lot of people know Jeff Stevens. He's a wonderful man. And Jeff comes to my house to do his 5th step. And 13 hours we were doing this 5th step. We smoked 3 packs of cigarettes each. My kids had a family pet, a rabbit named Martin. And Martin died from cigarette exposure. Like we killed the rabbit. And he had this massive asthma attack and had to go to the hospital at hour 13. And I'm telling you, that never happened again. And the idea here is that if you here's my policy now. If a guy came to me and he wrote 600 pages, guess what? I'm going to say, buddy, you overshot the mark, but let's sit down. You took the time to write it. I'm going to respect you enough to listen to it. But that's not what happens if you're a fifth step listener. This is what happens. You cheese out on the whole thing. You put points and like little cues and all that kind of stuff. And then you want to come to my house for a day and a half and do your inventory. It takes you 8 minutes to write it, and you want to talk about your inventory for 2 days. That's not happening. If you didn't write it, I ain't listening to it. It's just the information we get in the book. This is my new policy, and it works great. You know how long it takes me to hear an inventory? Maybe 2.5 hours. I get bottles of water, I get soda, I get bananas and apples, and I got a fireplace there, and we sit in the room, and I said, do you mind if I ask God into the mix? They say yes. And I say, well, I'm doing it anyway. I get on my knees, I say a prayer, I really ask, I want God here with us, because I don't want to judge or go to that awful place. And then what I do is I take a piece of paper, and every time you say selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened, every time you say the word, I write it down. I'm just sitting there. I say, make sure they know I'm not writing what you're saying to me. I'm writing down every time you say that word. Because what are we looking for in our inventory? Where are we selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to write it down every time you say the word. If somebody's been thorough about their inventory, at the end of the inventory, 2.5, 3 hours in, it's like this. You ready? Yeah, I'm ready. You're selfish, self-seeking, selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, dishonest, self-seeking, dishonest. Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking. I give it all back to them. So how do you feel? Not that great. I say, all right. And we go into step 6. And that's it. That's what it looks like. And there's no judgment. There's no, I love what Fish Food Phil said. I love how he handled that. So I think, well, that's not so bad. Here it is. This is you. All right, you want to live your life like this, or do you want to take this somewhere else? And we ask God to come into the mix. Now, I'm not against this whole drop the rock bullshit. I didn't mean to say bullshit. I'm not against this whole drop the rock phase that's all these meetings that are starting up. For people who are sober for a little while, don't start a meeting and invite new guys to the drop the rock meeting. Don't do that. It's not fair. We have step 6 and 7 that Chris just read to you. He read to you exactly what it is we're supposed to do. I learned that my last column is my mistakes and faults, that the nature of my wrongs is discovered, as I just explained in the 5th step, and in step 6 and 7, the defects of character and the shortcomings are what we're asking to be removed. These things are all the same words. Bill just used different words to describe them. We need this stuff gone, or we can't proceed. The drop the rock stuff is going to belabor the whole issue around defects of character and shortcomings. It's going to ask you to discover more truth about yourself, and that's not fair for a new guy, because in respite care, and you got to look at Alcoholics Anonymous in a couple different ways. In respite care, we need to get the person to this place of helping others, which is really our medicine. And in order to do that, we have to clear it as quickly as possible. That's my 2 cents worth. It might be a little opinionated. I love the book, Drop the Rock. I read it myself. I'll never knock a book that I don't read. It'll never happen. But I notice in our area, in my area, these groups have sprung up all over the place. Everybody wants to be different and have something new to talk about. And this Drop the Rock stuff was never intended to replace what's on page 76 here. It's never meant to replace that. It helps you to cognitively and do an analysis of your difficulties, and then it brings you back into the management role. It's giving you suggestions on how you can, just like the Living Sober book, how you can treat your alcoholism this way. And that's not what we need. God in the mix here. And then that's what the prayer that Chris just read is there. So, what does that do for us? Got all this stuff down on paper, shared it with another human being. I've asked God to take these defects of character and shortcomings because I can't do anything about them. And people think that sounds irresponsible. But if you were just going to sit there on that, I would say, yes, you're probably correct. That is irresponsible. But we're asked to do something very, very, very deliberate and very responsible in doing an 8-step list. That is a huge responsibility. And it's very hard to talk about the 8th step without talking about the 9th step. But it's mandatory. You have to recognize that there's a difference between the two. If you have a separation from the kinship of others, if you have a separation from your love of other man and people, and you just always feel separate, this 8th step is for you, not the 9th step. The 8th step is for you. These defects of character and shortcomings are what have kept me separate from people. And now I'm asked to make a list of all persons I had harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. They use the word all twice. Grammatically erroneous. They use it twice to emphasize how many people? How many? All. Who does that besides Nicoletta? Who does that? Who makes amends to them all? You know what I mean? Like, that's a heavy word. And you've got to become willing to make amends to them all. I will set right those wrongs that I cannot make immediately. I will do that. Now, in the 8th step, our mind is open to the harms done others. We have a list that's come out of that last column that I was showing you. When I'm talking about the guy that diddled me, and I get in there and we're talking, what did he do? He betrayed me. He manipulated me. He lied to me. And on the column with it, I've got my mother, I got my sister, I got ex-relationships, I've got my friends, the closest people to me. That list comes out of there, and I've got these. That's where it comes from. How does that even happen? Like, this guy wronged me when I was an 8-year-old kid, and now I'm getting a list of persons I had harmed. And it just goes, that's how it looks. So I've got this massive list of wrongs that I've done others. In that list, I'm going to sort of discern who's worthy of amends and who isn't. I will discern that in the 8th step. And the problem with that is that that's where you need your sponsor more than any other place in AA. You need your sponsor in the 8th and 9th steps more than any other place in Alcoholics Anonymous. Any other person in Alcoholics Anonymous can help you through the steps 1 through 8. But you need your sponsor right here, right now. Because you are going to have questions about amends. And if you have ever sat at a meeting where amends was the topic, you know that most of the conversation is driven towards not making amends. Somebody out there right now is going, yeah, but what about such and such? In their head. And if I said anybody, you've got any, people would bring it up. Do I have to make amends to them? The answer is yes, only 100% of the time. So shut up. Not you personally, but just don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to yourself. This idea that you're going to pick and choose or have a rationale behind who's getting these amends made. Not, amend means to change, to alter, to repair. If it came into your consciousness, if it came up in your last column of the inventory, their names go down. It's that simple. And righting a wrong isn't about saying sorry. Righting a wrong is addressing the issue. It's about being there and showing up. It's about being a parent. It's about not hiding, shucking, jiving, and weaving. That's what it's about. And I can do this stuff. In a change room in a high school, I busted into the change room when the guys were all out doing their athletics, and I stole a bunch of stuff out of pockets and stuff like that. Years later, I'm doing my inventory. And that stuff comes up, and I'm thinking, some of these guys were my pals. Some of these guys were my friends. I helped them look for their shit. You know what I mean? Like, if we catch this guy, it's like, I got to tell you, it was pretty embarrassing. This is inventory 2, I might add. Didn't come up on the first one. Imagine that. Didn't come up on the first one. Came up on the second one. Now, what happens is I put some of these names down here that I'm aware of. And I am devastatingly embarrassed and humiliated that I have to make this amend. So I go to this guy Norm and I start telling him that I took his wallet and I took his watch and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, "You helped me look for it, man." And I said, I know. And we talked about it. And he said, "You know what? Just stay away from me, cuz. Like, just don't, And this hurt. It hurt me. This is sober. And I've been sober for a while. And this hurt me. Years later, we run into this set of circumstances where he needed a place to stay. And I gave him a place to stay, and we lived together for a year. And we became like this. And it was only because I stepped up and was willing to address the issue. That's the thing, that's the power here, is about this denial about what I did or what I didn't do has no place in any of this. It has to do with just executing the proposition that's put in front of me. We became willing to make amends to them all. The 9th step amends, or the 9th step itself, in and of itself, is we make direct amends wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, in this 9th step, I come back into this sort of idea about rationale, right? I come back into this sort of idea about who's going to get my amends and who's not. Has anybody in here ever made a list in 8 steps and said, "Oh, I'm not making amends to that person"? I had a never. My dad was a never. I talked earlier about him. He was a never. There was another couple people that were nevers. Now here's the interesting thing about the nevers, and you guys have been around here for a while, you wouldn't have this experience yet, or you would probably have had this experience, is I'll be sitting at home one night, it'll be 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I get a hankering for a Magnum ice cream bar. You guys ever have those Magnum ice cream bars? So we got a Shoppers Drug Mart there, and I'll go to the all-night Shoppers Drug Mart, and I'm running around the Shoppers Drug Mart loading it up with black licorice and Magnum ice cream bars and all the stuff that's good for you at midnight, and all the stuff alcoholics eat. And run my cart, come around the corner, bang, slam right into a guy I was never going to make amends to. Now I got two choices. Do I clean it up, or do I act like I've never seen them? And if you've done a lot of damage in your hometown, ask yourself that. How many times have you crossed the road, went around a corner, and all that kind of stuff, and thought, I'm not ready for this right now? There are times where God will make a bank shot. And I ran into a guy, and I just laid it out there right at midnight, right in the store, and put it right on the table. And Chris was saying earlier about, I think it was here. It was either here or somewhere else we were talking. They're the people who end up sending people to you. Do you understand what I mean? The people that you had long-standing resentment with, or long-standing dissension, or long-standing, they're the people, when you make this stuff right, when you amend, to change, to alter, to repair is what amend means. When you amend the relation, they're the people who start sending people to you for help. And it doesn't matter whether you want to do it, or you think it's a good idea, or you like the idea, or, and I've had better and more experience. I've had two very powerful amends stories that I haven't got time to tell you right now, but I'm going to tell you about one that comes as a result of working with others. What time's our next break?
15 minutes.
Okay. So, if you put yourself in a position to be of service, you end up working with a lot of guys. And some of them you don't hand-pick them anymore. You know what I mean? You're not hand-picking them. There's some real dickheads that come and ask you for help. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to say it, but dickheads. So there's this massive guy. This guy's massive. He's like 7'6". He's a big man. He's one of the biggest men I've ever seen. And he starts coming to my meeting. Everybody's terrified of him. And he's an angry, pissed off guy. And in his sharing, every once in a while, he would open up and talk a little bit about all the women in his life that he had hit. Like, whether it was his mother, his sister, his daughters, or his wife. And he put his hands on women his whole life. And one day, him and I are talking, just the two of us in a little side room. And he starts weeping. And I'm sitting beside him, and he dwarfs me. I'm just sitting there, and he starts weeping. And I put my arm on his shoulders, and I said, "Buddy, it's going to be all right." He said, "How am I supposed to make that right? How am I supposed to make that right?" And I said, "You give me a few minutes, I'll come up with something." And so we're talking, and we talk about it, and I said, "Okay, I got it." You know this story, JJ? You hear me tell this story? I said, "Okay, so," I said, "Listen, 9 o'clock Saturday morning, I'm going to pick you up, and we're going to go down to it's called Mary's Place. We're going to go down to the shelter, and you're going to write a check and give it to these women, these abused women and kids." All of a sudden, his head comes up. He goes, "I'm not doing that." And I said, "What?" He said, I didn't do anything to those people. I'm not doing that. Screw you, man." He gets up and he turns around and says, "Hey, who are you telling me what to do?" And I said, "I'll be there at 9 o'clock. He says, "I'm not doing it." And he walks out. So 9 o'clock in the morning, I get down to his place and got AC/DC cranked and just bang, having a good time. And he jumps into my car and he says, "This is bullshit," but he's got his checkbook with him, right? He goes, "This is bullshit. I ain't doing this," right? And I said, yeah, whatever, brother. And we go down and we get in front of this place. I pull up out front, and he gets out of the car, bangs on my hood, gives me the finger. And now this guy does not want to do this, but look what's happening. And I just turn the tunes up more when he's complaining, and he just walks by my car and he goes up the steps to the door. And when he's standing at the door, you can see this big back, nothing else. And you see the little aluminum door open up. Just the top of the door opens up, and a couple seconds pass, and then these arms come up over his shoulders. Now, in the car, he says, "How much should I give him?" "I don't know. How much you got?" He said, "$300. I said, "$300's good." And his pencil's going right through the check. Right through the check. And he goes and he hands the check, and the arms come over his shoulders. Now, when this guy turned around to come down the stairs, it was a different man. He was like skipping. You know what I mean? He was like skipping. And he came out in front of my car and he jumps in and he says, "Where next?" Contrary action. This thing about making amends is not whether you think it's a good idea. We made direct amends wherever possible, not wherever comfortable. Wherever possible, Only when it would hurt somebody else do we have an option to have a conversation. And I'll tell you, I've got a lot of guys running up, I can't do that because it'll hurt such and such. And within 10 seconds, that theory of theirs is dismantled. Almost always, the ego, here's the problem here. Here's the problem. And this happens in the 5th step too. The ego does not want you to be sober. It wants you to suffer. It might even not want you to drink again, but it wants you to suffer. It doesn't want you to be content and happy without it. The ego wants to run your life. And the ego is that voice in your head right now that's saying, what voice? That's the ego. It's constantly in dialogue with you, telling you what to do. And when you do this stuff, you are in contravention of what the ego wants. Because you go and do a 5th step with somebody, the ego, oh, great. Now what am I going to play with? The ego doesn't play with solutions, it only plays with problems. So if you sit down and share all of your problems and all your difficulties with another human being, the ego's got no teeth. But what will happen is, to my good friend Brian, he's got this huge inventory. Well-written, good inventory, some awful stuff in there. And he's going, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and he gets to this one piece and he goes, I'm not saying that, and he keeps going. It was shoplifting, a $10 memorabilia card from a store. But the ego strapped onto that and said, don't tell him that, that's embarrassing. And when he went over it, and when he left, and it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, if we look back and we say, okay, I'm clean here, I've said everything, he looked back and said, I left that out. I left that out. Why? And the question is, why would he leave that out? And the answer is, the ego seized onto this really light-weighted thing that you thought wouldn't even matter, grabbed onto it so that he would almost do a 5th step. So he would almost be sober. And this is what happens in the 9th step. This is why you need your sponsor. I drive my guys to the hard ones. I take them there. And this is probably, this is the one everybody knows about. The 9th step is the one that's all over TV and all of My Name is Earl and all those shows like Shameless. All the 9th step stuff is in there, right? But to live this way in an honest, earnest attempt at setting right the wrongs is indeed, I believe, that is Alcoholics Anonymous, steps 4 through 9. That is our life. We inventory, we look inside, we tell somebody about it, and we go and we set right the wrongs. And our world becomes a world of safety and security because of that. And when you do it once, you want to do it twice. That big guy, I couldn't reel him back. He started cleaning house like you wouldn't believe. He started cleaning up like you wouldn't believe. That one, see, this is the problem. It's the same with, when you got a guy coming for your 5th step and you say with them, okay, just tell me the one thing you weren't going to tell me on your way here. You've heard them? You tried that before? That's what you tell the person. Tell me the thing you weren't going to tell me when you were driving here. Because we get that on the table, the rest will be a piece of cake. It's the same with the amends. Let's go make the amends that you think you're never going to do. Let's work on that. Let's try to do something about that. And when you realize that power is available to you, that you can do the very thing that your ego is telling you can't do, there's nothing that'll stop you here from growing. And steps 4 through 9 is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Steps 1, 2, 3 get us sort of in that place to do this stuff. And step 10, 11, 12, which we're going to talk about, is the stuff that holds it all together. And the best stories in Alcoholics Anonymous, and some of them are yet unwritten, the best stories in Alcoholics Anonymous are the amends stories. Just to synopsize this relationship, I grew up in an Irish Catholic alcoholic home that was wrought with violence and sexism and be tough and don't cry and all that shit. I was raised in that. It's not uncommon in Alcoholics Anonymous in my generation. It's not. But what ends up happening is I got an older brother, a younger brother, and a younger sister, and they're citizens. I was not. I was the bane of my parents' existence. I was an embarrassment to them. I caused a lot of calamity and difficulty in my family, and my family are good people. And my father was a raging alcoholic and an angry, bitter, violent alcoholic, but I loved my life. Sandy used to say, I said to Sandy at dinner, we were having dinner one night, he says, Marty, the older I get, the better my childhood was. And if you think that personality can't change here in AA, it changes. Your perceptions change. They legitimately change. That's what shifts. It's a shift in perception. It's a shift in how I see the world. I told you about that diddler. I was hiding behind that for many years in secrecy and self-contempt. That's how it worked in my life. And now all of a sudden it becomes this tool that I want to pull out every time I'm with a great big group of people to sit and talk about setting people free and being free of this stuff. We retain. It's like being free of this stuff is what matters. It's not about deciding what's right and what's wrong, or it's about being free. You know, and so my old man, I mean, he dies in a bed, and I'm the executor, and I've got my arm underneath his head. Now, I told you, these are citizens, my siblings. They're good people. But I'm the guy I'm the go-to in the family, and that's what happens with AA members. You become the go-to in your family. And I got my arm under my old man's head, and he passes away. And my older brother, who had been out drinking somewhere, he comes in and he's angry. He's angry because my father's dead. He didn't get the call in time, and he starts losing it. And he's slamming the bed up and down in the room. He's having a tantrum. My old man's bouncing around dead and everything, and I'm trying to hang on to him. And my younger brother says, they all hated my dad. And guess what? My dad's been gone since 2001. They still hate him. They bristle with antagonism. You bring up the name at Christmas or anniversaries or parties, and they get angry and they start spinning war stories. And I had a relationship with my father for the last 7 years of his life that was like this. And he'd run up to me at every function. He was all smashed up from car accidents and violence. And he'd come run up to me, couldn't talk, and he'd say, hi, how you doing? And I'd say, hi, Dad. And I'd give him a hug, and he'd ask how all you guys were doing. AA saved his boy's life. And my old man we turned up, we were lovers. At the time of his death, we were very close. And my brother, my Square John citizen, two brothers and sister, their legacy is hatred. My legacy is everything we talked about this morning. My legacy is my father did the best he could with what he could. He was a sick man, you know, and so am I. And on that premise, we met. I was no longer a victim of my father's anger or rage. And I could laugh at him and hold him. And this immense stuff goes, when Chris says it's 1,000 miles deep, I think this is what they're talking about. We enter into this place right now where who's that guy going out setting right the wrongs when he was rejecting the idea of doing inventory? Who's that guy? That's a different man. And I don't care if it's 2 weeks ago you wrote your inventory. The man that sits down, or woman that sits down and writes her inventory, is not the same person that's going out and knocking on doors. They are changed. And we have all of this experience in steps 4 through 9, and it's sort of synopsized for us at the beginning of step 10. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And I believe step 10 has all the secrets to good living. I think it's undersold in AA. I don't think we talk about it enough. I don't think we hold each other accountable to it enough. People who've been around here for a little while. If you're not feeling the joy and the bliss of being sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to suggest to you it's tied into a 10th step living. And we'll talk about it. And my fidelity to this book is the same in the 10th step as it is in the 4th step. You'll sort of understand that practice is a way of life. Practice, just like Chris just read, practice is a way of life. This 10th step can enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole and never return to the abyss of selfishness and self-centeredness. It's quite spectacular, I think. We'll share some stories about that, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, good? We take a break?
We're good.
Take it.